Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first momentum cohort call. You'll have to, I apologize for my red screen here. I just can't do office work in the winter without my red light on. It's like my favorite thing ever. So most of the calls might be red hued for me for the next I don't even know. Utah winters never end, so maybe just forever. But hopefully that's not annoying for you guys. And Coach Sam and I are here and super excited to be starting, well, I guess extending with all of you. I am personally in my own fat loss, I guess what's the word? Own calorie deficit right now, fat loss phase. And I'm halfway through mine. So I'm like a little bit ahead of everyone in the cohort. I'm 7 weeks in. So just barely. I think everyone with the added bonus week, we're starting week 7. Is that right? If you don't count prep week, starting week 6. So another 7 weeks another 8 weeks, including this week to go. My math is all wrong since we did a bonus week. So that will put us ending 3, 4, 5 on the 22nd of December, which was going to be the 15th. Now it's the 22nd, which is great timing, like right before Christmas. We'll probably wrap things up, I would say, for most of you, kind of that week before, and make sure everybody has maintenance macros and can transition into maintenance from there when you feel ready. And also, we wanted to use this extension for those of you that have maybe never transitioned to maintenance macros before. I think a lot of times in a fat loss phase, you will move into a calorie deficit and then stay there forever, or go from, I've had experienced this myself. I think it can be easy to do this even when you have the knowledge to start in a calorie deficit, see great results, and then be very just like thinking of all the foods that you want to eat and all the things that you want to do, especially with this time of year, go right into Christmas and just like a huge calorie surplus. So that is something that we want to be strategic about. I think really coming back to maintenance is probably one of the most challenging parts of a fat loss phase, because it's not like you go from being a little bit hungry, making sacrifices, thinking about food, to just like free for all. And I think a lot of people don't have an after the calorie deficit plan, and it becomes that. And then they end up gaining weight and end up in that kind of chronic dieting loop. So that is what we really want to avoid. So I'm super excited for those of you that are doing the extension, that we can be really smart moving into maintenance. And when you feel ready during these 8 weeks, just let us know and we will help you reverse diet back up to maintenance, whether that's 2 jumps or just one big jump back up to your maintenance intake. That will kind of depend on how many plateaus you've had throughout the process, where you started at, where you're coming into the cohort from, and we will help guide you back to maintenance. And timing wise, that should work really well into our January group, which we will launch. I was just planning that out today. I think it will launch on the 12th of January, will be our prep week for our Habits New Year Habits Challenge. And that is going to be a focus on just habits and maintenance and living in maintenance, essentially. So excited for that. If that's something you want to transition into, that could be a really good transition coming out of a fat loss phase. So I wanted to use these cohort calls since we have a little bit smaller group, a little bit more intimate. I'm hoping you guys feel like you can just ask any questions you have in advance or live, and Sam and I can answer those for you. So I'm going to start with what we already have. I think we have plenty here to kind of talk through. And then if any thoughts come up during the call, then feel free to ask them. Anything to add, Sam, on just the cohort itself? Okay. So this one, actually, Sam, you might have more experience personally than I do. Eating on a night shift and flipping a day to night schedule. And I think this is the same question. Shift work and eating, flipping schedules between day and night. Keep everything to a 24-hour window. So no food between midnight and 6 a.m., etc. Question mark. So what would you say here for someone shifting from day to night shift on food? Sam
So
is
I,
the
yeah,
nurse.
I used to work nights as a nurse. What I would do is I would just keep, so like the day that I work, I kind of eat normal and I'm terrible with sleeping. So you have to consider that too. We're not getting as much sleep. So I kind of did a higher calorie a little bit for those days. But I would just eat normal, log it as normal. And then I would have my breakfast at like, I don't know, I used to do it. I mean, it depends on the time as a nurse, but like between like around 3 a.m. So about, 4-ish, 3 to 4 hours before my shift ended when I was gonna be heading home and wanting to go to sleep, I would have one meal. So I would just log that as my breakfast. And then when I get home, I'm sleeping. So then you just log the rest of the food the same the rest of the day. So my breakfast is, I mean, it's the same. It's just you're eating breakfast at 3 a.m. and then you're kind of sleeping.
So if you
That's
were
how
to
I would do it.
like,
That's
oh, I was just gonna say, let's say your shift is from what's like a typical shift time for a night shift for a nurse?
Well, mine was usually 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I just eat my regular day from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. I usually ate before my shift
Hmm.
because it's chaos when you get on and there's not enough time.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up my day, or maybe have one more like bedtime snack, but you're not really going to bed at around, like 10 p.m. or whenever things slow down. And then that was my last meal for that day. And then moving on to the next day, I kind of waited to eat until about, like I said, 3 a.m. And that's my breakfast because
And then
I'm
you would,
going to bed at like,
yeah.
then going to bed at like 7 a.m. Between school. You're done at 7 a.m.
So since I have never worked a night shift, some questions on this would be really easy to do if you worked every day, right? 7 days a week. I mean, that would suck, but it would be
Right.
easy in terms of like food. So your normal day is you're not coming off of a work night, right? So you're eating your normal day, doing it as planned. So then do you typically, as a nurse, work multiple nights in a row, or is it every other? How would you kind of shift that next day?
It depends on,
Like it
it
might be
just
some
depends
nights
on the
on, one
person.
night
I mean,
off.
you try to do three in a row for most, or two in a row, but um, I mean, I just kind of do the same thing. And then I hopefully sleep for 4 or 5 hours, so I'm not eating during that window. And then it's usually just like a normal day. Like I don't really eat for a couple hours after I wake up, and then I have my next meal again. So I already had my breakfast at 3 a.m. I
Yep.
slept, and then I'm having probably two more meals the rest of the day before I go to bed.
Yeah. So would you look at if you're tracking your food intake on MyFitnessPal, are you just looking at your day as a 24-hour
I
day?
am, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
It's
I
what's
think that's
easiest for me.
helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just you're just like literally moving the meals to different times of the day. That's what felt best for my body. I've tried like not eating for the
That's
whole
a
shift just was not realistic. I
yeah.
mean, yes, you're busy, but you also don't want to go to bed starving because then your sleep's already going to be trash. You don't want it to be
Yep.
even worse. So that's what I would do. And um just talking with, I know we had David on yesterday, if you guys
Yeah.
listened to that call, but he always recommends too, just with the atmosphere as far as like working night shift, there's lots of fluorescent lights. So
Yeah.
going more towards like the, like lower carb can be helpful and just
Hmm.
focusing more on fats and proteins, as far as sticking to the same kind of circadian rhythm too. So I would kind of lean towards that way, lower carbs, mostly just my carbs came from vegetables in that meal that I ate while I was at work.
Yeah. What about blue light blocking glasses? Not to get too like, obviously we're talking fat loss here, but even just thinking through night shift working, if it's night outside, does it benefit you to wear blue light blocking glasses during those night hours?
Yeah, I would wear them when I was at my computer.
Yeah.
But I didn't wear them to like the
Like
patient's
patient.
rooms or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You could, I mean,
I wore them to my kid's
whatever you want to do.
basketball game last night. I mean,
They just bug me when you lean over and then they just didn't, it's not like they're
yeah,
fitted to you. So
depends on the type you have. Yeah, for
yeah, but
sure.
I would definitely wear them. Yeah, at the
Yeah.
computer.
So that we're not like spiking cortisol if we don't need to be too. And then just that should help you be able to fall asleep a little bit easier when you get home and not be quite so
Right.
overstimulated.
And the
So
same thing with your last meal. I would do the same thing as like I'm going to bed. I would give myself 3 hours, let my food digest, not eat anything super heavy or very much before I'm trying to go to bed at, like 8 a.m.
yeah,
So
I love that. Any questions? If anyone else has any questions on shift working, let us know and we can expound on that too. But that's super helpful. Okay, any tips on not tracking but still being good for a weekend away? I think this would be, I think it comes down to kind of goals. But I'm just going to assume we're in a fat loss phase, we're in a calorie deficit, we have a weekend away, and we want sort of like a template to go off of so that we are staying as much in a calorie deficit as possible without tracking our food intake. So I think a few tips. I like to have just like a few non-negotiables if this is the case for me, knowing I might not still be in a calorie deficit, right? I'm not going to be as accurate this way than I would be tracking my food, but at the same time, like what's the goal here with this weekend? Am I okay maybe not having the same rate of progress while I'm gone and having just more quality time, being able to be more present, more spontaneous? And if that's the case, then I think having some ground rules for yourself to just kind of anchor you can be really helpful. So, some things to keep in mind would be like building a balanced meal. When you do eat, have half the plate be vegetables, and then a fourth of the plate be lean proteins, a fourth of the plate be like carbohydrates that maybe are coming from more single food ingredients, and then healthy fats on top. Like trying to have a balanced meal when you do eat so that you are satiated throughout the day and aren't just like snacking all day depending on travel, but when you're sitting down to eat, you are eating a balanced meal. Anything to go with that. I would say just hunger cues too when you are eating out, not needing to eat your whole plate of food necessarily, but paying attention. What does hunger feel like here? How satisfied am I? Am I eating slowly? Am I being mindful? And you should know at this point what it feels like to be in a calorie deficit. So even wanting to kind of stick with that, you could, instead of eating till you're full, even just eating till just barely satisfied, knowing that's kind of the optimal intake for a calorie deficit as well. What would you say to add on like the non-negotiables?
staying on top of your water intake and then not going too long without eating like in between meals. And if you do go a long time in between eating, make sure you have some kind of higher protein snack leading into the meal, just so those hunger cues can feel a little bit off if you're dehydrated or if you haven't eaten in a really long time. So that's what I personally like to do. And just like you said, the same things. You're always going to lean more towards the protein options, grilled, broiled, steamed. Um, Depending on what I ate, like if I'm eating out for 3 meals, like 1 or 2 of the meals I'll get double vegetables instead of like a
Mhm.
starch, just to, save and make sure I'm staying in that deficit.
Yeah, and getting in protein with each meal. I think sometimes that can be hard to do and with travel. So sometimes I'll even pack some things. Like I love Chomp's beef sticks, because those you don't have to refrigerate them. I love how they taste. They're easy to get in. I'll have two, and that's 18 grams of protein, typically, depending on kind of which brand you're using. And then I also like protein powder. I can get like single serve packets and bring those with me, have that with water. I can also usually find like Greek yogurt at most hotels. Or it's like in Utah, we have Maverick gas stations, and they usually have some, you can get hard boiled eggs, you can get maybe like prosciutto with a little bit of cheese, like a meat and cheese kind of stick. Just getting food on the go and just thinking if you are going to have a snack, then having that be centered around protein will help keep you satiated throughout the day. And then I like to think through like not even just adhering to a calorie deficit, but what's going to make me feel the best on this trip. If I'm eating out like a really heavy breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I don't feel very good. Like a couple days into that, I'm feeling pretty lethargic. I'm feeling just like not great. I definitely don't want to get a workout in when I get home, or it's harder to want to move a lot. So I'll usually prioritize dinner when I travel. I want to go somewhere. I want to experience the food. I want to have something delicious. I don't want to worry about really anything beyond like I'm going to get protein in and make that a priority. So I will try to have just a higher, kind of a leaner option for breakfast and lunch if possible. Maybe save, if I'm going to have an indulgence, like a treat, save that for later in the day and just stick to, if I can make my own breakfast. Or breakfast is pretty easy to order out, like get an egg white omelet or add an egg to it, get like eggs your way, fruit on the side. Um, Add vegetables. Breakfast is pretty easy. Lunch can be a little harder, but like getting a big salad, adding double protein, dressing on the side. And then in addition to that, depending on the type of travel you're doing, I think limiting liquid calories can be helpful, and staying hydrated, like Sam mentioned as well. And then even if you're not getting in a set workout, prioritizing walking, like making that a part of your trip, walking to go see something, getting in an early morning walk, getting in a walk after dinner and inviting people, just trying to prioritize movement still and not being quite as rigid about the type of movement you're doing. And then the rest, just, what's out of your control, let go and prioritize. I like to go into a trip with a goal in mind of like what do I want to prioritize on this trip? How do I want to feel while I'm there? And then how do I want to feel after? So maybe I want to be really present on the trip, but I also want to come home and like hit the ground running and feel really good moving into my regular routine again. So what does that look like in terms of movement and food while I'm traveling? And that's always different for me. It kind of just depends on my current goals and what type of travel I'm doing. If it's somewhere I've been a lot of times and I'm not really that excited about the food, I might track and prepare all of my food. If it's somewhere new and I'm really excited about the food, I might be okay coming back maybe from a calorie surplus, and knowing that that's going to slow down my progress. So I would say just like being intentional before you leave, and then setting your kind of ground rules, non-negotiables for while you're traveling to that goal or intention. How quickly would one's body put on weight without tracking for a week? I'm having fear of undoing the hard work I've put in over the past 5 weeks because I'm taking a big trip for 10 days and don't plan on tracking. This one's really variable. I mean, 10 days is a long time. If you're in like a calorie surplus for 10 days, that can definitely kind of reverse some progress. But then at the same time, implementing some of the things that we just talked about, maybe you're at maintenance for 10 days and you're not continuing fat loss, but you are coming back and just getting right back into it. And maybe the scale is hard because asking like how quickly would one's body put on weight without tracking for a week, this is so variable. If you're taking a road trip and you're not flying and your food, you're not tracking, but you're cooking a lot of your meals and just kind of doing what we mentioned as far as like paying attention to hunger, getting in movement, getting in water, prioritizing protein, you probably won't gain much weight at all. If you are traveling and having, that variable, then I almost always retain a decent amount of water coming off of a flight. The longer I travel, the worse it is. So you're going to see that show up on the scale just due to usually dehydration and then your body retaining water, sometimes inflammation. And then if you couple that with where you're at in your cycle, you might see weight gain, hormonal weight gain added on top of that. If you have alcohol through travel, that can impact the scale. So there's a lot of things that can happen with the scale that can be a little scary after travel. And I usually I just move right back into my calorie deficit, normal things, know that there's going to be fluctuations, some more than others. I really prioritize drinking a lot of water coming off of travel because that will help my body kind of let that go, and especially like inflammation or just water retention. And just give it 2 weeks. That's enough time usually for if you are kind of hitting right during ovulation or end of luteal where you're retaining more water hormonally, then that should even out. That should be enough time to even out travel. Also, likely you're coming back into training again. And so your body's going to be pulling more just glycogen storage into your muscles as well as water into your muscles. And so that can retain some more water. So usually about 2 weeks is enough time for the scale to kind of regulate and you to get more accurate readings. I recommend just either not weighing yourself for a week post travel if that's going to trigger you, or weigh yourself and just know like it's going to go down. It's just data and it can give you kind of a norm for like next time you travel of what to expect. And just know that you're going to be fine overall. Like 10 days in the grand scheme of things is totally fine. You just might not get that validation from the scale for a minute. When I went to North Carolina, it was only 4 days, but I also got sick coming off of travel. So I was definitely more inflamed and then went into my period. So it really took me a solid 2 weeks to see the scale move at all. And it went up. So it came back down eventually, but that was something I expected and wasn't worried about in the process. So I think just having the data and knowing what it means and not getting too attached emotionally to it is helpful because there's just a lot that can happen with travel and it's not all body fat. It's just usually inflammation and water retention. Would you add anything to that, Sam?
Nope, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Yeah. And then just deciding ahead, like, do you want to be kind of at maintenance? Do you think you're going to be in a calorie surplus? How much are you going to move? Just thinking through all those things so you can be intentional, but you definitely do not need to track. How do I know when I might need a calorie adjustment and how long after training should we wait to do zone 2 cardio? What would you say on the calorie adjustment, Sam?
That's a little bit trickier when you're in a gaining phase, but I mean, if you are feeling good, you're not seeing your weight spike too much, your photos aren't changing, and you want to kind of push the limit a little bit, I would say after about 3 weeks, you could go up in calories a little bit if you're able to be consistent and your hunger feels okay, and kind of see how far you can push that threshold as far as being on the higher end of maintenance and kind of right on the edge of being in a surplus. But those are the biggest things. I mean, you're just going to see visually the changes. You might get hungrier at one point. Maybe that's your metabolism kind of upregulating. So that could be an indication that maybe you can go up in calories a little bit after a couple weeks if your hunger remains a bit higher. I don't know what else. Gaining, I mean, being in maintenance is a little bit trickier on how far you need to go up, and because usually you feel pretty, I don't know, at least for me, I kind of feel the same because maintenance is a range, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
you're in that range, there's not for me always a huge like indicator of like when I could possibly need to go up. I kind of just like to push it because I am a hard gainer. So I'll just kind of slowly push it from week to week, every 3 weeks or so, kind of try to do a surplus, see what my body does after a couple more weeks, and then take it from there.
Yeah. And on the zone 2 cardio question, it was how long after training should you wait to do zone 2? So, with the goal being fat loss and also wanting to maintain muscle, this is going to be something we want to be kind of careful about just because we're going to be limited on energy and also our ability to recover is going to be down regulated than if we were at maintenance intake or in a calorie surplus is going to be less of a like deal, I guess you could say. Um, so ideally you want to wait 6 to 8 hours like have those on separate parts of the day or on non-training days. So if you're lifting, ideally put your cardio on your non-lifting days so that you have enough time to recover. And you can add in that zone 2, give it a good effort, but also preserve muscle mass with enough recovery time. If I am going to pair it with a lifting day, I try to pair it with an upper body day. If you're going to pair it with a lower body day, then I would definitely do it like 6 to 8 hours later. If worst case scenario, I think 2 to 3 hours is what I would recommend. So hopefully that gives you kind of some things to play with. If you're lifting 4 days a week and you're doing 2 days of zone 2 cardio, you should be able to easily put those in on your off days. If not, then I would put them in on your upper body days because most often zone 2 is going to be more using your lower body. So not as much taxed and not as much like impacting your ability to put on muscle or maintain it through a fat loss phase.
And as far as adjustments, I just realized that my mind is with the gains because I was doing other
Oh,
macros and you guys are in a fat loss phase, so I apologize. So as far as needing an adjustment in a caloric deficit,
same thing kind of applies, like 3 weeks
I mean, it does, yes.
is a good rule of thumb.
Well, if you're gonna want to go, like it's gonna be maybe time to go up a little bit if you start to not be compliant, if your hunger goes up too high,
Yeah.
if your energy tanks and you can't push in your workouts or progress, that might be time to maybe go up a little bit. But as far as going down, and you're feeling good, energy's good, workouts feel good, 2 to 3 weeks at least, I would give it before you do an adjustment. The goal is always going to be to lose fat on the highest amount of calories as possible. So we don't want to adjust down if we don't have to. So if you're seeing progress on the scale, going down an average of about half a pound a week, it gets a little bit, when you get close to that, the last 5 pounds, it gets very, very hard. So, I mean, you kind of have to ask yourself too if that's going to end up being worth it or not to you. But
Yeah.
you are going to feel pretty, like if you get to those last 5 pounds, sometimes you do feel a little bit
Tired and
not great. So you kind of just
yeah.
have to wrap your head, yeah, around that. So that would be up to you if you decide you want to go down even more when you are plateauing for 2 to 3 weeks, or if you just want to kind of stay put or start going back up.
Yeah. And if that's something like I would say in the group, give us kind of some of like your thoughts and like questions in regards to your specific circumstances. And we can definitely help you troubleshoot if it's time to adjust or time to just like be patient. And then
Yeah, and you
last,
can always message me too at the Hungry Fitness
yes.
Coaching. I'm happy to help however I can.
Yes. Last question was looking for more low calorie, high protein snacks. They were doing Greek yogurt 1 to 2 times a day with a half a scoop of protein powder. I would challenge you to actually think less about snacks and more about increasing your meal volume. So when you're eating real, like not real animal protein, I want you to increase from 3 ounces to maybe 4 to 6 ounces. Have your meals be more significant so that you don't need to snack and you're not trying to come up with like all these snack combinations. I will usually have one snack a day and it's like a higher protein snack and I'll pair it with as much vegetables as I can kind of take in a fat loss phase because that keeps me full. It increases fiber, helps with micronutrients. And then I just have large meals that sustain me. So I really don't need snacks. So that's what I would recommend. I would love to, if you tag me on the group, I would love to take a look at your food diary, like a day or two, and I can give you some suggestions too. Sometimes it can be helpful to just like see what someone's eating and then tell you where you could optimize. So tag me and I'm happy to do that this week. Otherwise, we will answer. I think there were a couple more and we'll answer those in the group. But if you guys have more questions this week, please ask them. We're in week 1 of the next 8 weeks, and I want you guys to just get as much out of these 8 weeks as you can. And with a smaller group, I want to hear more from you. So ask away. And we look forward to the next 2 months. We'll be doing calls every other week. Take photos, take measurements. We'll track that and we'll continue to assess progress and do this together. So I hope everyone has a great week and happy Halloween. Thanks for joining.